The moment I saw Valerie Thornton strutting across my yard, clipboard in hand at precisely 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday, I knew I was in for another unnecessary showdown. That sharp, staccato gait of hers was unmistakable, pure raw power trip mode. Flanking her like disciplined deputies were Eleanor Phelps and Marcia Gutierrez, forming the holy trinity of our neighborhood's most feared tribunal, the Brookstone Covenant Council. I put my coffee down and opened the front door just as Valerie raised her hand to ring the bell for a third time. Her finger paused midair and then retracted, visibly annoyed. "Mr. Whitaker," she announced in a tone suggesting I'd personally insulted the Founding Fathers, "we have to address your continued breaches of residential compliance." I leaned casually against the doorframe, took a long, slow sip of coffee. "Morning to you too, Valerie. Glorious weather today." Her mouth twitched. "This isn't a social visit. You've installed an unapproved water harvesting unit." I followed her gaze to the small, green barrel nestled beneath my gutter. "That decorative planter, that's a rain barrel," she snapped, jabbing her clipboard like it held the 10 Commandments. "Section 11.3 of our residential water regulation strictly prohibits it." Behind her, Eleanor nodded like a bobblehead on speed, while Marcia was already snapping pictures, shifting angles like a paparazzo catching me mid-felonious garden crime. "I'll look into it," I replied smoothly, my usual response to her weekly complaints. Last month, it had been the garden gnomes. Before that, my LED house number lights. Apparently, they were distractingly luminescent. Valerie's eyes, magnified behind her jeweled glasses, narrowed. "Looking into it is not enough. You will remove it by Monday or receive a formal penalty." I smiled. "Duly noted. Anything else?" Her gaze roamed my property like a predator scenting weakness. It landed on my newly installed smart doorbell. "Is that device capturing audio without authorization?" "It activates when motion is detected," I replied calmly. "Completely within legal bounds in this state." She pursed her lips. "We'll verify that." As they retreated to their absurdly customized golf cart. Yes, Valerie had a golf cart labeled WA Command. I heard Eleanor mutter something about my lawn's suspicious incline. I chuckled, took another sip, and walked back inside. What Valerie didn't realize was that I'd done my homework. I'm a municipal planner, and before I bought this lot 3 years ago, I dissected every document. My property, the last plot developed in Brookstone Hollow, had something unique the WA conveniently ignored: a municipal easement slicing through my backyard. An essential utility corridor that powered, watered, and gassed the entire East Grid, including Valerie's McMansion. So, instead of removing my planter, on Monday, I installed 2 more. Painted to match the trim, naturally. Entirely decorative, of course. The water they collected was, at best, a side effect. Valerie's response was swift. A formal citation landed on my porch Tuesday, complete with a $75 fine and a revised removal deadline. I added it to my growing Valerie vault. Wednesday escalated. I returned home to a city notice: excessive ambient lighting complaint. The city inspector who showed up Thursday blinked at my tasteful solar lights. "I don't see an issue here," he said, puzzled. "Your setup is well below brightness limits." He leaned in. "We get weaponized neighbor complaints sometimes. Sorry about this." By Friday, the gloves came off. My security footage caught Valerie sneaking into my backyard before sunrise, actually measuring my shrubs with a retractable tape measure. When I confronted her, she claimed to be chasing a runaway pet ferret. She doesn't own one, but who was I to judge? Later that evening, my internet and cable went down. I checked the utility panel. It had clearly been tampered with, wires deliberately slashed. The technician confirmed it: sabotage. But here's where Valerie really miscalculated. She'd sabotaged the utility panel, the one housed on my property that distributed service to the entire eastern loop. And by Saturday morning, that damage had triggered a surge that fried the transformer for 42 houses, including hers. At exactly 7:30 a.m., I stood on my porch with a fresh brew, waiting. And right on schedule, here came Valerie, not marching, but sprinting. "No clipboard, no entourage, Mr. Whitaker," she panted. "We've got a crisis. Half the homes on this side have lost power. My refrigerator, my HVAC, everything's out." I took a long sip. "That's rough. I had some technical issues myself yesterday. Someone seems to have damaged my service panel." Her face twisted. "That's awful. Do you know who?" "I have some theories," I said calmly. "Luckily, I've got security cams with full audio." She paled. "Of course. The real issue, I added, is that the distribution panel was on the municipal easement, which sits entirely within my property line. Utility companies will need written access permission to initiate repairs. She blinked. What? How long will it take? Normally, a day or two, but now it's a red tape problem, especially when there's active vandalism involved. Surely we can reach an understanding, she said, voice trembling. The food in my freezer alone is worth $900. I shrugged. Coincidentally, that's close to what I've calculated I've lost between petty fines, missed work for inspections, and now repair logistics. She nodded rapidly. I can cover that. There's also the emotional strain, I added. Relentless citations, false reports, and now property damage. My attorney suggested we value that at about $2,500. Attorney, she gasped. I pulled out my phone and showed her an email chain, Spencer and Goldstein, law litigation experts. They specialize in cases like this. They mentioned something about personal liability for elected board members acting in bad faith. Valerie wobbled slightly. But I'm a reasonable guy, I said, standing. I'm prepared to let this whole mess slide. On a few conditions. All citations against me, past and pending, must be formally withdrawn. You cease all surveillance and complaint filing. And, of course, you cover damages in full. That's blackmail, she stammered. I raised an eyebrow. No, Valerie, that's settlement negotiation. Blackmail would be threatening to turn over footage of you trespassing and directing utility sabotage to law enforcement, which, by the way, is a felony when it involves critical infrastructure. Her complexion turned the color of chalk. Take your time, I added, heading inside. Monday's your deadline, same one you gave me. By Sunday afternoon, Valerie had folded. I received a signed agreement waiving all citations and covering the repair bill in full. She also called an emergency HOA board session. Naturally, I attended, armed with recordings, photos, and 6 months' worth of documentation. It went downhill for her instantly. The HOA treasurer disclosed that Valerie had been using community funds for personal, compliance patrol, expenses, gas for the golf cart, document printing, even the city complaint fees. That was enough for a removal vote. Then came my evidence. Crystal clear footage of Valerie crossing into my yard with tools in hand, muttering on the phone about cutting the main and teaching him a lesson. Her voice was unmistakable. The board voted unanimously to strip her of her presidency, effective immediately. But Valerie's nightmare wasn't over. Monday morning, officers arrived with a warrant. Tampering with a critical utilities node isn't just a violation, it's a Class C felony. The detective handling the case took my statement with intense interest, especially the escalation pattern. This goes beyond vandalism, he said. This could have endangered lives. Elderly residents with medical needs, kids who rely on refrigerated meds. I blinked. I hadn't thought of that. Mr. Singh next door uses a sleep apnea machine. The Carters have a newborn. Valerie's arraignment was the following week. I sat quietly in the back as the charges were read aloud. Malicious destruction of utility property, criminal endangerment, conspiracy to commit infrastructure sabotage, and more. The judge set her bail at $25,000. When her attorney objected, citing community leadership, the prosecutor stepped in. Your Honor, she leveraged that role to harass residents and ultimately disrupt critical services to dozens of homes. We believe the amount is not only appropriate, it's lenient. The judge agreed. As Valerie was led away, her face an ashen mask, her husband walked out of the courtroom without saying a word. Last I heard, she was facing over $300,000 in civil claims from affected residents. Her real estate license was under suspension, and her husband had filed for divorce. And it all started with a couple of decorative rain barrels. But the final blow came during discovery. Valerie's call logs and emails revealed she'd targeted at least 5 other residents over the years, harassing them with anonymous tips, false complaints, and board manipulation. The DA announced potential charges for historic misconduct, opening the door for a longer sentence. 5 years in prison, all because she thought she could bully people into submission, and underestimated the one guy who read the fine print. As I sipped coffee on my porch that Saturday morning, watching utility crews begin the repairs she was now paying for, I reflected on how different it all could have been if she'd just said, "Nice planters, Jack."